athletic area. And it gives me great satisfaction when I see the young kids from Hamlin Elementary School with their backpacks on their back, following behind a Hamlin student going over to Hamlin. So that interaction is really special for us because it helps the students here, but it also helps our students in understanding what it means in a deeper, richer way of how to be a human being. You know, trying to think about what I wanted to share with you today, you know, I found a poem by Darrell Holmes. Langston Hughes is really my favorite poet, but I decided I'd use a different poet today. And what he was talking about, I think, really speaks to what's going on in our nation today and how we have to look for that warmth inside of us. We have to keep trying to figure out how do we each day navigate the waters and the streams that are there. At Hamlin, we've done a couple of things. A few years ago, we started a Center for Justice and Law. And we created all these community conversations. And these conversations were the direct result of the Philander Castile shooting that was very close to this campus. And I live on Summit Avenue, right across from the governor. So guess what? All the protests were right in front of Hamlin's house. So we were right in the thick of it. Just recently, we got an award from the American Association of Universities and Colleges to do additional conversations about race. One, because we have not tackled that topic in a long, long time in our nation. We think we have, but we really haven't. I mean, the reference here in terms of, I grew up in Danville, Virginia, the last capital of the Confederacy. Probably very few of you have heard of Danville, Virginia. I didn't think so. But it was the last capital of the Confederacy. It's considered the last capital of the Confederacy because it's where Jefferson Davis was as the North was closing in. Now, Jefferson Davis was in a house on Main Street during this time period in Danville, Virginia. That house became the Danville City Public Library. And I tell this story a lot, I mean, I don't want you all to think because I have gray hair that I'm that old. It's just that I'm cheap. I don't believe in dyeing my hair because it costs too much. So I just leave it like it is. That became the Danville City Library. When I was a kid growing up in Danville, I could not go to that library. I had to walk by that library to go to the black library that was not even the size of these two rooms together. It's much smaller. It's like the size of a living room. Imagine a home that's really a duplex, because it was a duplex. And one side of the duplex, the first floor, was a library. So the back was a kitchen area and whatever else you might have there. That's the library I had to go to. Imagine someone like me who was a voracious reader. I loved books. So every day during the summer, now this is when you allowed your children to do this. You don't do this nowadays. And I can't blame us for not doing it nowadays. Every day during the summer, I walked about 5 miles each way to get to that library. Because that's how important it was to me. Now later, I don't remember this, but I've read it since. When the feds came down on Danville about how they were doing the libraries, and said that the library, the Danville City Library, the main library, had to be open to all people in Danville. Guess what the leaders in Danville did? They removed the tables and chairs so you couldn't come into the library and sit. That's how adamant they were against people like me learning, becoming educated, wanting to learn and generate new knowledge. So what I do today grows out in some ways, even though I'm not so sure I would have known it as I was growing up. But I think about my experiences and who I am today and what I believe in, what I passionately believe in. I believe that all children have a right to an education. All children have a right to be treated with decency and respect. That's what I believe. And that's what led me to become a university president. It led me to become the president of Hamlin University specifically because of the focus on social justice. I don't know how many of you know this, but you know that a child who goes to Hamlin Elementary School when the time comes time for them, remember this, when it comes time for them to go to college, where can they go? Hamlin. And how much do they pay? Huh? They have a scholarship to Hamlin, okay? Because of the relationship between this school and Hamlin University. There's a commitment to this school. There's a commitment to education. There's a commitment to quality. There's a commitment to making sure that we have a generation of knowledge generators. That's our commitment. And that's one of the reasons why I'm at Hamlin University. So there's stories I could tell you about growing up in Danville that some of you may already know. Danville was an interesting place. That's all I can say. And I go back there as infrequently as I possibly can. Even though my mother and father are buried there, they're not alive there, they're buried there. So I have siblings, and they can take pictures and send them to me. So it's not a place that was welcoming and all those other kinds of things. But it was a place where I had teachers who believed in me. And that's the reason why when I get invited to come to Hamlin Elementary School, I do it. There's never a moment's hesitation, because I cannot tell you enough the power of a teacher. You know that. The power of a teacher. I did research when I spent a good deal, 20 years of my academic career at Brown University, which is an Ivy League institution in Providence, Rhode Island. And I did a lot of research in the Boston area on gangs. And one thing I learned about gang members, stereotypes, forget them. There are members of gangs that the gang members protect because they see them as their future. They see them as being able to do things that the rest of them can't do. So when it comes time to engage in illegal activities, they don't let them do it. They protect them because they're going to finish high school. They're going to go into college. They're gonna do something that the rest of them don't think they have a chance to do. So please don't stereotype all gang members, because not all of them are like that. They protect, it's a family. But I did a lot of that research. And one thing I found out about the gang members who were able to get out of that environment, one young man said to me, who went on to go to Morehouse, which is a HBCU, all-male school in Atlanta. One thing he said to me, when I was in elementary school, a teacher identified a teacher in middle school that would watch over me. So when I went to middle school, there was already a teacher there. And then when I went to high school, there was a teacher in high school who did the same thing. So there was a teacher all along the way making sure. But I will tell you now, I am disturbed. I don't know whether you are or not. I was just in Washington. Been all over, so I'm not quite sure where I was last. I was in Washington, D.C. not too long ago, and I went up on the Hill, because one of the things that's being challenged now by the administration, Pell Grants, Perkins loans, work study, those are things that families rely on to help their children get through college. Those are important things. Now, I know that your children are young and you're probably not worried about it, but you should worry about it now, because it might not exist later if we don't all fight against this now. They're talking about creating one federal loan program, one federal assistance program. Well, and so we've already done the data, run the analysis to show if there's one federal financial aid system, the amount of money any person will get from the federal government goes down, will be significantly decreased. So we're really fighting to preserve these kinds of educational sort of entitlements, really. And so that others will be able to take advantage of it. So it's a never-ending battle to make sure that we're doing the work we need to do to protect what people have worked so hard for. Remember, it's your taxpayer dollars. You know, this money is your money. It's not the government's money, really. It's your money. Whether it's Perkins, whatever, it's your money. You paid it in taxes. That's why the government has it. So we're trying to protect those kinds of things because they will impact who goes to college, who has access in the future. And that's what's important, who has access in the future. I had access because of my parents and people like my parents. My parents were civil rights workers. They marched. My father was the local secretary of the local NAACP. So they were actively engaged in all of these political things when I was a kid. Again, as a kid, you don't realize how important it is until much later, and you step back and you realize what your parents did. But so these are things that that they fought really hard to get. That's now being challenged. So it's a real concern of ours. The other concern of ours, and this should be a concern of it, is shifting money from public schools to charter schools. Now, I'm not opposed to charter schools, although in Vermont, where I moved from, charter schools were not allowed. They were public schools because they believed in their public schools, so they were public schools. But shifting that money and putting it more into charter schools. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with a charter school if a charter school is going to be subjected to the same thing public school teachers are. And they're not at this point. They're not. So there's not the same kind of scrutiny of charter school teachers as there are public school teachers. I will also tell you this, you will never hear me criticize a teacher because I respect them too much. And I know how hard they work to get to where they are. So you will never, but prior to coming here, I was the dean of a college of education and social services. So I have prepared teachers at the University of Vermont. So I respect this profession tremendously, and I don't people realize just how hard teachers work. But there are a lot of things going on that we've got to pay attention to. And I will tell you that the other thing that frightens me is determining who's an American and who's not, based on how much melanin we have in our skin. That frightens me, because that reminds me of old. That reminds me of when I was a kid, and deciding who was legitimate and who was not, who had access and who didn't, who was good and who was bad, all those other kinds of things. That frightens me right now. And I'm not saying this to frighten any of you, but it's a concern of mine, because we've come really far. Although we got a long way to go, we've come far. Because when I went to elementary school, the seed in front of us right now didn't exist. Everyone in my elementary school looked like me. And it was not because it was a neighborhood school and everybody lived in the neighborhood with the same color. No. That was the only school we could go to at that time period. We don't want to return to that time period, because just think about how richer our kids' relationships are as a result of getting to know someone who doesn't look like them. And appreciating just how important difference is, and understanding, respecting difference. You know, I hear all the time, I was reading in Inside Higher Education before I came here, and at Princeton and at, I want to say Eastern Connecticut State, but it may not be Eastern Connecticut State. You had a professor teaching a class, and each of those classes, a professor at Princeton used the N-word, and a professor at Eastern Connecticut State used the N-word. And the Eastern Connecticut professor was suspended. The Princeton professor was defended. Each of them argued that it was in the context of teaching that they used it. I get that. But we also must be culturally aware of just how powerful language is. And that even though we might think we're using language to teach, language has also been used to keep people down. So language matters no matter what context we use it in, whether it's in an education setting or not. It matters. So there are lots of things that's on my mind right now, lots of things that I'm concerned about, lots of things that I'm fighting for. And you know, when you become a university president, they say you have to become apolitical. There's not an apolitical bone in my body. I told them that when they hired me, that if you want someone who's going to sit back quietly and not say much, I'm not your person, okay? But if you're looking for someone who's going to stand up for what they believe in, then I'm your person. Some people didn't believe me. But I told them, I am not someone you know, I always was told that if something is said or happens in your presence that you know is not right, if you do not speak up and address it, you are a problem just as much as the person who might have done or said that, because you let it go. I don't let it go. My excuse now, in order to appease my board, my excuse now is that every day I get a little older and I have a little less patience. That's my excuse. Now you all know better, right? It has nothing to do with me getting older. It has everything to do with the fact that I cannot stand silence. But you know, this is you all know that. This is a wonderful school. I can't say enough about how hard the teachers work here. And we have about, last count anyway, about 200 members of the Hamlin community who do something over here on a yearly basis. That's because we believe in this school. My past dean of students, Alan Sickberg, you know Alan, he has a little buddy over here. And he brings his buddy to campus. And I think his buddy keeps him straight more than Alan keeps him straight. So it is, but you know, my faculty and staff and students love the relationship between Hamlin and this school. So there's a lot more that I can tell you about who I am, what I've done, and what I believe in. But I just want you to know that this school has a supporter in Hamlin. This school has someone who believes in everything that goes on. So the lab school, I'm surprised that it didn't exist, to be honest with you. Matter of fact, when I came here, I just assumed. You know, you should never assume. But I did. And so I asked questions. Why isn't Hamlin Elementary School the lab school? Because I came from a university where we did have lab schools that was there. I mean, under me was a child care center that was under my college. It was a lab school for us, an early childhood program for us. So you make these assumptions that these are just natural relationships that should exist. We become better, each of us, as a result of that partnership. So I'm just going to stop right there and see if any of you have any questions of me. Yes?
Do you believe that voracious readers are born or created?
I think well, let's put it this way. Every child that's born has a natural curiosity. And they always ask the question, why? Just think of little toddlers. Once they start talking, and they get on your nerves because they say, why? That says to me, they have a thirst for knowledge. Reading is the way in which you get that knowledge. So I don't know if you're born with a desire to read, but you're certainly born with a thirst to know. And reading is one way in which you do it. And if you really think about it, I think good readers, although I hate this notion about you're either good at math or you're good at reading. No. A good reader can be good at everything. You might just show it in a different kind of way, but a good reader can be good at everything. So I do think that one of the things that we do, my son is 24. Matter of fact, I just put him on a plane this morning to go back to New York. And I was going to bring the book over with me. I actually brought a poem from a book that I read to him as a kid. It was a book of poetry. I started reading to my son before he was born. And that was our evening, day, whatever. All the Harry Potter books, every last one of them, even those last volumes that were thicker than I don't know what, every last one of those books were read out loud. Every last one of them to my son. That's what we did. We're a family of readers. My husband was an English teacher. So he taught middle school and high school before he started teaching at the university level. But middle school, he started as a middle school teacher. Well, actually, he started out in marketing and decided the business world was not for him. So he went back and got his teaching degree and became a middle school teacher, and then a high school English teacher, and a hockey coach in high school. So all those kinds of things. So when I talk about education being sort of in my bones and a part of who I am, you get a sense of a part of who I am. But I think reading is something that is part of our natural curiosity. We should all read. And there was a study done a few years ago that talked about the difference between young kids who grew up in home with books versus those who didn't. And guess whose outlook was better? The one that grew up in the home with books. But if your home doesn't have a lot of books, there's a library across the street there. And there are libraries everywhere. Take advantage of those libraries. It becomes a child's home away from home. At least it did for me. Yes?
I have a question. You were mentioning about the Pell Grants and other grants are being challenged. How would, I guess, we be with you get involved and, I guess, help with that?
Well, you know, I think letting Betsy know, who's our rep in the House, Betty McCullough. She is very good. She's very good, and she's tenacious. But you let Betty McCullough know that you don't want this to happen. You let Amy Klobuchar, Tina Smith, because those are now our senators. You let them know that just how important these are. And then I mean, this is in this area. You also have other reps from other parts of Minnesota. But Betty McCullough, Keith Ellison over in Minneapolis. Those are the people. You let them know just how important this is. And the other thing you want to make sure that you continue to fight for is the state grant. Okay? Right now, our legislators are not challenging the state grant, but every year we have to go up and make sure we argue to keep that state grant in place. Because the state grant, the child gets regardless of where they go to school. So whether it's public or private, they can get that state grant. And that's I think, what, $6,000 or something like that? Significant.
What is the scholarship amount that is available to Hamlin Elementary students if they go to university?
If I'm not mistaken, it's free.
Really?
They have to pay for the room and board,
Right.
but not the, yeah. And if you think about it, now, let me just say this. Nobody at Hamlin, very few anyway, pays the full sticker price of going to Hamlin. I want to make that perfectly clear. I know that your kids aren't there yet, but let me make that perfectly clear. Right now, if I were to put a dollar amount without discounting on the tuition, that's $40,000. Okay? That's significant. And then there's room and board. So that maybe even less than that. Maybe less than that. So it's a significant amount that we will give to a child. And we do have students who come from Hamlin Elementary School, gone to Hamlin, and I think we had a teacher from Hamlin, but went through that system. So it is a strong partnership, and I stress that to the superintendent. One, because when Valeria was the superintendent, they were going to move the school. That was one of the things. And when I heard that, of course, I went up in arms. No, you can't move this school. School's important. And I met with Valeria, and I told her about this partnership. She didn't really know the extent of the partnership. When she heard it, she said, no, we're not moving the school. So when the superintendent came, I wanted to make sure, the current superintendent, I wanted to make sure that he knows the relationship between Hamlin and Hamlin. And they were very serious about it. And he said, well, we're not going to touch the school. I know he said that the Chinese immersion school is moving. But this school, he said, is not. I'm going to hold him to his word. Because this is an important community school for us, for the community, for everyone involved. And I will also tell you this, one of the things that we did track, now I haven't tracked it lately, but when I first arrived here in Hamlin, we looked at who the kids are who go to Hamlin Elementary School, and who are kids who go to similar schools like Hamlin Elementary School. Do you realize that Hamlin Elementary School's kids who map the kids at other places like them scored better in the test than those other kids? Just so you know that. Okay? Now we talk about test scores and whatever, but I always think there's more to test scores than meets the eye. I'm not a big proponent of all that testing. I think it takes away from other things we need to be doing. But just so you know that, when we looked at that data, and we sort of disaggregated that data because we wanted to look at a child who has this demographics compared to a child who has a similar demographics going to a different school. What did they look like on those tests? And that was data that we did. So we're committed to this school. We believe in this school. Any other questions? You don't have no questions? Except there were two. failing too. I have been known, you know, on Saturday, I think it was Saturday morning, my day started, we had admitted students come to Hamlin. Because, you know, this is the recruiting season. So admitted students and their parents were at Hamlin. And I did my little thing and said things that I needed to say. And then I said, are there any questions? And everyone was quiet. I said, well, I'm just going to let you know, I'm standing here until there is one. And sure enough, questions that I guess they wanted me to sit down. So questions came fast and furious. I don't know what it was, but it was great. We're actually right in the thick of trying to recruit our class right now. So it's an interesting time at Hamlin. And we've been successful with that, doing that. I don't know how many of you know that Hamlin is the oldest university in the state of Minnesota. You know that? Yeah, it is the oldest. We were founded in 1854. We actually had our charter after the University of Minnesota, but University of Minnesota had no students. In 1854, we had students when we opened our door. But also, you might not have known that the founders of Hamlin University were also the founders, per se, of K through 12 education in the state. Because remember, Minnesota was a territory in 1854. And in order to have higher education, they had to create a system underneath that so they would have students coming through to get to the university. So it was the Hamlin founders who also were instrumental in bringing education writ large to the state of Minnesota. So that's the reason why Hamlin's history, for the most part, for many, many years, was education. That was the history of Hamlin University. They were the ones that produced the majority of the teachers in the state. It was Hamlin. And when Hamlin opened its doors in 1854, this is another thing I think that people need to know about Hamlin. In 1854, we opened our doors. We had two important people who were part of the very first class at Hamlin University. Women. Hamlin University was the first institution in Minnesota to also admit and graduate women. The first two graduates in the state of Minnesota at the undergraduate and graduate level were from Hamlin. In Hamlin. I could go on and on and on. We didn't have our first student of color to graduate until 1922. I don't know what took them so long. But it was 1922, and that was Anna Lyle Hedgeman, who went on to be one of the more instrumental people during the Truman administration who was actively involved in the civil rights movement. And you don't hear a lot about her name because women during the civil rights movement, names were in the background. You heard about the men, but not necessarily the women. But she was one of the major orchestrators of the March on Washington. That was Anna Lyle Hedgeman. Yeah.
So you've been kind of talking about it, but the slogan, which I really associate with your face and your, which is that we take the lead.
Yeah.
What does that mean as we move into the future?
Yeah. It means that we're not going to stand back on tradition. We're not going to, I'll back up and tell you what I saw when I came to Hamlin. I saw a very good institution that a lot of people didn't know anything about. And so one of the things I said we need to do was start telling our story. And if you look at the history, and the reason why I tell you about in 1854 when we were founded, and there were women, we're going back to that and saying we were an institution in this state that took the lead. When women were not being admitted into universities and colleges, Hamlin, being a part of the territory, included women as part of this class. As a matter of fact, if you go back and read the information about Hamlin, the founder said we will not open this door unless women are included. So that's what we talk about when we say we take the lead. We're not sitting back. And that's what we talk about. That's what we talk about. When I say to you as president, I'm not afraid to deal with issues of race, class, gender, sexuality, identity, any of those things. I'm just not afraid to deal with those issues. Because if we in higher ed are silent, when our voice can mean a lot, then things won't change. They will remain the same. So we have to be willing to speak out and speak out often. Yeah, and let me just tell this story. I was on an NPR show with the president of another university, a college here, and the interviewer, I think her name is Tina, many of you know who she is at NPR, asked a question, what was your favorite class when you were in college? And I said philosophy. The other person who came from Metro State said philosophy of science. So we both had similar interests in terms of a class that we really enjoyed. The other person said organic chemistry because I failed. And then he went on to talk about failing that class and how important it was to him. And then she looked at me, and I said, I didn't have the luxury of failing. So she said, well, I said, if I had failed the class, I don't care what that class was, I wouldn't be president of Hamlin University. I didn't have the luxury of failing. You know, I mean, just be real. Just be real. I didn't have that luxury of failing. And then he went on to say, oh, yeah. My wife was the same way. She couldn't fail either. So the interviewer looked at him and said, isn't your wife white and a pediatrician? He didn't get what was being said. And many of you may know Devendra, who was Indian, who was the president of Metro State at the time. And he and I looked at each other and just smiled. Because Devendra said, I didn't have the luxury of failing either. So, you cannot fail and think you're going to get where you're going to go, where you want to get, if you fall into a particular category. You can fail at some things, but academically you can't.
Well, on behalf of the Board of Education, thank you guys for the partnership. Thank you for recognizing the knowledge and the need of this. But that's a bigger question, and as a newer board member on the board, you guys got it, you get it, you're doing it, and you're working. How do we as a board, as we're moving forward and building those relationships and expecting that all of our scholars go on to whether a pathway of education, and a lot of those will be college, how do we work with other colleges to say we're taking the lead in this community? St. Paul has so many higher institutions of learning, but yet we are partnering with very few in the capacity such as this.
Yeah, I mean, for us it's easy because we go back over 100 years, and it's across the street. That does not mean that others should not do it either. When I was at the University of Vermont, we did it. When I was at Brown University, we did it. So it is, I think letting them know that each of us have a responsibility. So I know when the city wanted all of us to pay some sort of tax, I will be honest with you, I was opposed to that because we were already giving. And when I met with Melvin, the new mayor, after the election, and he said to me, I'm not interested in this tax. He said, if I have to give up $50,000 for a Hamlin Elementary School kid to go to Hamlin, then I'm not giving up that for money that might amount to just that for one kid, when this could be more than one kid. So, the mayor got it in the sense that he's saying that relationship is more important to me than a few dollars that come this way that don't go back into our children. And I was really proud and pleased to hear him say that he does not want to do anything that's going to damage our relationship or damage relationship with any school. I think if the schools say they want to really be a partner with the city, ask about the scholarship. What are you doing for the children in our community? That's what I would go back at them. What can we count on you to do for them later when they're trying to get educated? Because then, I honestly hope it doesn't go up much more. But I'll tell you, when my kid was born, and I was preparing for college when he was born, I never in a million years thought it would be what it cost. I'll be honest with you. And he went to NYU, and it's more than what Hamlin is. And I thought I was ready.
No.
And Hamlin and NYU was need-based only. And they told me I had no need. I told them nobody asked me. But I think that's what we do. We just say, if you really do want to do this, this is a way in which you do it. I mean, there are lots of things that Hamlin is doing. For example, the new TRIA arena, ice arena down there, Hamlin built out 2 locker rooms because our hockey team is now paying that. We paid for those locker rooms. When we're not in season, hockey season, the city gets to use our locker rooms. There's no money come back to us. They get to use it. We also partner with the Saints. The Saints is our home field. We actually gave $1 million as they were building that facility, and then we give so much every year in order to maintain it. So you see we're not interested in going out and doing certain things. We can partner with the school, we can partner with the city in any kind of way. That's what Hamlin's going to do.
Is this partnership between Hamlin University and GMAIN now that is gonna be continued?
It's between Hamlin and Hamlin Elementary School. I don't know about, all I know about that one, I don't know about the immersion school. That I don't know about. So I can't speak to that. I can only speak to that. I know about Hamlin Elementary School and Hamlin. That partnership is the one that I'm very much aware of. It could be the other one. I just don't know. And I don't want to say something that I can't walk back. This one I do know. Any other questions before I get out of your space?
No. I have no space. I don't know what I'm going to talk about now. Okay.
There's, you know, in this space, in this topic, there's lots to talk about because you parents play a key role in educating our children. You're the ones that put these beliefs and ideas in their heads and they hold on to. And I remember when I was in Florida, and I was in one of the offices at the University of North Florida there, and there was a young lady with an infant in her hand. And you know, infants do what infants do. I mean, it may have been about 8 or 9 months old, so staring. That's what babies do. They see somebody they don't know, they stare. And you know what the parent said to me? Well, my baby's curious. She's never seen a black person before. My baby didn't know if I was black, green, or purple. My baby had no idea. What, you know, they just saw a person who was smiling at them. That's all that baby saw. Imagine growing up what that baby now is being told. Because that baby is being told something that is divisive. Because the baby didn't know. I don't know of any baby who comes up, but the only time a baby might mistake you is that if you're a woman, you have your hair pulled back and got a baseball cap on, they think you're a male. They can't differentiate between gender sometimes if we have a haircut really short and pulled back. But when it comes to race, or ethnicity, they have no idea. They are a clean slate. So it's what we say to them and how we say it that really puts these ideas in their head. And you know, I am just so thrilled and honored that my son is the kind of person he is, because my son respects difference. He grew up in a mixed race home. He was in mixed race environments. He has his girlfriend now. What can I say? As a parent, when your kids get to the stage, when they get serious about people, keep your mouth shut. You all know this, right? Because your parents had to keep your mouth shut when you were growing up. You keep your mouth shut because when you start talking, they don't let them go, even though it's time to let them go.
You told us this morning that when something is said and we don't say something that I'm surprised that you're still using the word race because we're all human. And you may have geographic backgrounds that evolve to the bodies that we have now, but our DNA is all the same.
Well, it's not. I mean, our genome, yes, it's the same. But remember, race is very much a part of our society. And when Obama became president, what did people say? We're part of a colorblind society. How wrong we were. How wrong. I knew that we were not part of a colorblind society, that we were not there yet. Because when I walk into a room, this one is different because you know what. But when I walk into most rooms, nobody knows I'm the president of Hamlin University unless they know me. They don't know I'm the president of Hamlin University. They see a black woman. That's what they see when I walk into that room. And I will also say this to you. I am proud of being a black woman. I'm proud of my African heritage. And so to me, that's who I am. Race is important to me because I am African American. I am black. And I celebrate that every single day. So when you say I'm just human, you take that part of my culture away. And I say, don't take that away from me. That's who I am. And that's who I will always be. My son is mixed race. But I say to my son, you do not deny your father, who's Italian and Polish. But you do not deny that you are of African descent too. Because when you walk in a room, nobody's going to know your father's Italian and Polish. They're going to see him and what he looks like. So as a mother, I made sure my son understood race and how race operates in this society. Because it's real. It's real. So I hear what you're saying, that we're all part of the human race. That's absolutely true. But within that, there are differences. And differences we should celebrate. We should celebrate those differences. I would never deny anyone their heritage, regardless of what that heritage might be. Whether you're from Latin America, whether you're from China, whether you're from Africa, wherever you might be, or whether you're from the Middle East, that's your heritage. That's who you are. That's what you know. And that's nothing wrong with that. So race, I would say, until we deal with the questions of race in this society, we will always be have challenges in this country. Until we stop seeing some people as better than others, we will always have challenges in this country. When I went to South Africa, when Mandela's mistress was the president of University of Cape Town, Mapele. She was the first black woman to become president of the University of Cape Town. She couldn't buy her own home. She was the president of Cape Town. She had a medical degree. In order to buy the home that she had to have a white person buy that home and then move in. That wasn't that long ago. It's right after apartheid. That wasn't that long ago. So race matters. Here this woman is accomplished. She and not Mandela, Stephen Biko. Stephen Biko's mistress, not Mandela's mistress. I don't know which one of them go, but Stephen Biko's mistress.
He was locked up for a long time.
That's right. Stephen Biko. That's whose mistress it was. Because they actually were in medical school together, and he dropped out to be a part of the movement, and she stayed in medical school. But you know, she couldn't buy her own home. So that tells us that race still matters quite a bit. And you go other places that race matters. So I think if we deny that, then when my son stepped into an environment that he didn't understand, and if he only saw I'm human, he wouldn't understand what was happening to him and why, and therefore wouldn't know how to navigate that environment. I wanted my son to know how not only to navigate, but to negotiate within that environment. You can't do that unless you understand race. Yes, sweetheart. You're going, what is wrong with this lady? You are the future, my dear. Well, I don't know if any of you have any other questions, but as I said, it's always a treat for me to come over and talk to the parents here. It's a highlight of my day, and when the invitation came in, there was no way I was going to say no to this invitation, because it's one of the more important things that I can do on any given day. I just want to say this to you. We're about to start a program at Hamlin. That's for primarily parents or adults who are 26 and older. There are a lot of parents who started college and didn't finish college for whatever reason. Yes. Well, we're going to put, as soon as our Board of Trustees approves it, we're going to put online a program that allows adults who were not able to finish college for whatever reason, often financial reasons, to finish. Knowing that, and I think we talked about this last year.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
I'm happy girl.
Yes, I did. But we talked about this, and I'm going, okay, this is something that Hamlin needs to do, is figure out how we create opportunities for others. What we say at Hamlin is that we are about one access, and then helping people understand what's possible for them. What's possible. I was just talking about you.
Bad stuff?
You know that's not a bad word. Let me tell you, that's not a bad word that I have to say about that man. Not one bad word. I will tell you one of my greatest joys is knowing that he's there and knowing that what we want to do here at Hamlin Elementary School with Hamlin as a partner, he supports 100%. So I'm going to get out of the way now.
No, not yet. We are going to get to the
I was coming to hear what you were saying.
We are so honored that you are the leader, and we have the opportunity to partner with you.
Thank you so much. It's my joy. Thank you. And I am truly honored. I am truly honored. He's a friend and a really good person. You all know that.
That's sweet of you to say. Are you taking off?
Well, you better talk.
I don't know what I'm saying. Okay, I'm talking now? Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Not only do I support the work that Dr. Miller is leading, I actually think it's the example that we need to be kind of replicating all over the city. It is such an important honor, you know, to say that you, Dr. Miller, are just going to make a way for all of our students here who come through this building. You know, my children are 9, 10, and 11. And one thing we know is that, you know, so I started the St. Paul Promise neighborhood when I was on the city council. That's something that this kind of whole full service community school is, I think, patterned, you know, at least some of the kind of stuff we're doing here on. I've gotten a chance to walk through this building and see the kind of work that's happening here, and I'm really, really proud of it. And it's totally being the kind of the forerunner for a lot of our work. What I was going to say is my 9, 10, and 11-year-old, we know they're for 3/4 of the jobs they're going to apply for, they'll need something beyond a high school diploma. When I was on the city council, I represented Frogtown, which at the time had a 10% college graduation rate. We know that's just not going to work, right? And so for you, Dr. Miller, to take your whole university and say, I'm not just a university leader, we're a community, we're leading a community here, and to say we're just going to make college possible for all these young people, to make sure that cost is not a barrier to college, is so critical. So thank you so much. Would you guys just give her a round of applause? And so our goal is to double down, right? Our goal is completely to double down on that promise and make it a citywide promise. That's why we've set this kind of big goal to say that we as a community, we can put $50, you know, what we're imagining is, what if we as a community said we're going to invest in every single one of our children born in this city, we're going to put $50 in the bank when they're born to start them with a college savings account. I think that, so when I said that at my inaugural address last month, and ever since I did, people have been running up on me to say, $50 isn't enough, $50 won't pay for college. And I go, you're right, calm down. $50 won't pay for college, that's true. But, and this is what excites me, probably more than anything else right now, our young people are so hungry for somebody to believe in them, for somebody to invest in them, right? And for somebody to say, you know, we support you. That research shows, listen to this, research shows that young people from low and moderate income families who have just between $100 and $400 put away for college are 3 times more likely to go to college, and when they do, 4 times more likely to graduate. How can we afford not to do something like that? So my passion, so when I was on the city council, we started like really getting the city involved in education because these are my passions. And people would say, well, that's not what the city does. Which was always interesting to me for a bunch of reasons, you know. Because one, I would say, well, it sounds like what you think is that what the city does should be more defined based on what we did last year than what people are telling us they need this year, right? But the second thing, and more importantly, is if preparing our young people for the future isn't what we do, then what do we do? You know, I don't get what is the work if that's not what it is. I have no idea. So I'm really passionate though about this sense, and there's a group of people across the nation who are really investing in what's called this 2-generation approach to eliminate poverty, right? And the 2-generation approach is really simple. It's based on probably 20 years of science and a million years of common sense that says if we really want to transform the life and the trajectory for our young people, we can't do it around parents, right? I just told you, I have a 9, 10, and 11-year-old. I defy you to transform their life without going through me.
Right. Right.
And so the reason we're working with the city, the reason we have to work through the city is because in St. Paul, 72% of our students in our public schools qualify for free and reduced lunch. If our teachers are here trying to have a conversation about social studies, Dr. Miller, or trying to have a conversation about, pre-algebra or whatever it is, and those children came to school hungry and don't know where they're gonna sleep tonight, then we're the problem. And so our work, our goal is to just partner with our incredible school district, our incredible school board, our incredible administration. We have our school board member, Jeannie Foster, here. It's good to see you. God bless. Thank you for your work. She and I got the chance to spend some time together over this past weekend. And I appreciate your leadership, joking aside. You know, that was a lot of work this weekend. And both our teachers union and our school board and our administration, you know, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that we just have a whole bunch of folks who are passionate about our schools, you know, and I can say this is important, you know, that the conflict really isn't about vision, right? That we all have this big vision for the safe and nurturing learning environment and teaching environment that our students and our teachers. The challenge is frankly resources, right? And we're just our schools are just under-resourced on the national level. We're under-resourced on the state level. And they ask us, they tell us, you have to do this and this and this, and don't provide the supports. And so, you know, the work that you do, the work that our teachers do, the work that you do, Dr. Miller, because that includes higher education as well, to sort of make those resources stretch, is really heroic, right? And we know that work will be easier when we support our parents. Right? When we support our kids, you know, and even just within my own story, you know, I went to college on a track and field scholarship, and there are people in this community who laugh at that because they say, you know, I remember when Melvin wasn't that fast. You know, I ended up winning state and being All-American, but you know how it is in community. You got you grew up in the community you grew up in, and people are, he wasn't that much, he wasn't high. But what happened was, I grew up in the rec center, and I grew up at the Martin Luther King Center. And they had a track team down there in the gym. We started out just running laps around the gym, and then we'd go outside and we run laps on the sidewalk around the building. And then after Central's track team got done training in the springtime, we'd go to Central. We didn't have permission to be in there. We'd be the rec center team, and we'd go to Central and hop the fence and go run laps on the Central's track, right? But what happened is my dad came to every single practice. Not just every single meet. My dad came to every single practice, right? And he would be sitting there, and while all the other kids were goofing on, I'd be trying to show him off for my dad, how fast I was, right? And what ended up happening was, while everybody else was goofing off, I was working out. And, you know, over the weeks and over the months and over the years, I ended up getting a lot faster. And it wasn't because my dad knew a whole bunch about track and field. It was just because he was there. And your presence in this building is revolutionary. You ain't got to know algebra, calculus. You ain't got to know who signed what document and what. Your presence just sitting inside this building